Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today. The next hour is devoted to learning something more, not just about the world of shoes and ships and sealing wax, but about how, what and why we believe as we do. A time for those willing to question what they think they know or what they may believe, those willing to be uncertain for an hour. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right, our chat room is open, and my partner Ravinder awaits you there now. You can log on by going to provocativeenlightenment.com/chat. We do have a great chat room, so Ravinder, would you like to share the glory of your chat room with us?
The glory of the chat room is just exciting conversation, some fun. We have a bit of a laugh in the chat room too, but we do discuss generally what is going on the air, and then we ask each other questions, and people in the chat room always come up with some great answers, so it adds an entire new dimension to the subject matter at hand. It's definitely worth you coming in if you can. Obviously not if you're driving or something like that, but if you can go online, go to provocativeenlightenment.com/chat and come say hello.
All right. In this week's Spotlight, I want to draw your attention to some important and yet generally little-known aspects about music. Years ago, I became interested in the power of sound. One of my early studies had to do with replicating a finding I discovered having to do with the influence of music on animals. The study I'm referred to showed that cows gave more milk when they listened to soothing songs like Bridge Over Troubled Water. According to the study, cows find it easy to release oxytocin, which is a hormone that is related to the milk process, when they listen to music. Studies have shown that playing slow, rhythmic music influences animals and lowers their stress. Indeed, psychologists at the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom experimented with music and milk production by testing fast music and slow music to two different groups of cows. The results showed that the cows that listened to slow music increased their milk output by 3%. Meanwhile, cows that heard fast music showed no change in milk production. Following up on this study, many began testing other animals and the influence music had on their production. For example, Spanish scientists have found that playing classical music to layer hens reduces their stress levels, building on previous studies that show calmer chickens have heavier eggs. Others discovered that chickens laid more eggs. Additionally, dogs are more relaxed in kennels when listening to classical music. Bird brains react to music similar to how humans react to music. Fish can identify composers, and elephants may actually be better at playing music than humans. What's more, scientists have learned to write music that cats and monkeys favorably respond to. Studies have shown that many animals create music and that music can influence the mood states of animals. So the fact is, music has a universal influence on the entire animal kingdom. Well, what about plants? It turns out that studies have also found positive effects of music on plants. Dr. T.C. Singh also discovered that seeds that were exposed to music and later germinated produced plants that had more leaves, were of greater size, and had other improved characteristics. It practically changed the plant's genetic chromosomes, he said. Working around the same time as Singh, Canadian engineer Eugene Canby exposed wheat to J.S. Bach's Violin Sonata and observed a 66% increase in yield. Canby's research reinforces Singh's findings. Okay, back to my own research. Using my stallion stables at the time and during breeding season, I initiated 2 quick studies. This is a time of stress in a breeding stable. The stallions are anxious, the mares are nervous, even when they're ready to receive the stud, and this excitement causes all the horses to pace and wave their heads and necks back and forth. While playing easy listening music, we watched this stress disappear. The horses became much quieter, threw much less hay on the ground, and their water consumption returned to normal. Then I tried playing heavy metal music and witnessed tension rise. This sort of music appeared to worsen the nervousness and increase the stress, so we stopped it after less than a full day. One way I have evaluated music is with a device given me by one of the co-inventors of ultrasound, Mr. Vic Waddell. The device is a cymatic unit that displays the geometry of music live time. I have seen the geometry of music, and some is organic, beautiful, while other music is so discordant as to represent only a helter mix of non-organic images. Every week, we play our guests' favorite music right here on this show. It's interesting to me in many ways, and we have often discovered some truly self-disclosing aspects about our guest. Music continues to be an important part of who we are. Just this past week, I posted a study that showed tailored music sessions could be crucial in transforming the lives of millions of people whose speech is impacted by learning difficulties, strokes, dementia, brain damage, and autism. Music has awakened those with serious cognitive issues, such as Alzheimer's patients, who are unable to even answer yes or no questions. Play the right tune, and suddenly they are fully alert and aware and cognizant of their surroundings, able to dance a jig, answer questions, and carry on a normal conversation. I could go on and on about the power of music, but it astounds me that somehow we lost the importance of music in our educational system. Dropping classes in music theory and or appreciation in many schools. For me, it's time we bring music back into our schools and embrace its sometimes magical power to heal. My thoughts anyway. What are yours, Ravinder?
No, I think the whole subject about music is really fascinating. You have music in spiritual context and community context, and so it's very significant to all of us. I do have a question for you, though. You're talking about the effects of music, and it's like, am I hearing two different things here? So you can have the power of music, and generally that's going to be the more inspiring, relaxing, or classical music. It doesn't tend to be the hard rock or the, other crazy sounds out there. So you have that part of it, which is more mechanical. But then when you're talking about people, say, with Alzheimer's who respond to music, from what I've heard, that tends to be whatever their preferred music was beforehand. So is that going to be a different effect? Is it because they're remembering the music and that aids the triggering of the awakening that we can see sometimes?
That's a good question, but I think you're talking about apples and oranges here. If we're looking at music increasing the productivity of chickens, cows, or what have you, we're looking at lowering stress. Music that lowers stress is not necessarily the music that I heard when I was 14 years of age, and it was rock and roll. Okay? The music, on the other hand, that the Alzheimer's patient responds to is meaningful music to them. And yet at the same time I say that, and there are several of these on YouTube that our listening audience can go out and look at, when these people awaken, they're not listening to acid rock. The music that they're listening to is never, it may be upbeat music like the old rock and roll, but it's not the discordant sounds that I see in a cymatic device that come as a result of just crashing metal.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Every week I read some of your letters as our way of involving you while paying respect to the very important role you play in making this show successful. Our last live show featured Kathy Bird, and we spoke about her son and book, soon to become a movie, The Boy Who Knew Too Much. Jason wrote, wow, just imagine having your child remember a past life so vividly. I think that would scare me. Lisa wrote, her pastor has to be among the worst I have heard of, telling Kathy that her son must be possessed by the devil. That was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Emily wrote, I want to see the movie, but I can't wait, so I guess I'll buy the book. I didn't know who Lou Gehrig was, but when I looked him up, I see why Kathy is helping him with baseball so much and so early in his life. Kimberly wrote, I love stories like these. They fascinate me to no end. But who would you even begin to talk to about this? Even though there have been many past life remembrances, there is still so much controversy. It would cause me to have fear about how people would treat my son. How would you decide to go about this and still be safe? I think that's a really relevant question. Billy wrote, I love the show. Moving on, Karen wrote this about my book, Gotcha, The Subordination of Free Will. If you are one of those people who believes that ignorance is bliss, then this book is not for you. So who is it for? It is for the enlightened souls who are on a mission to change the world for the better. If you are one of those, then you must read this book. Once again, Eldon Taylor has demonstrated with mastery and ample evidence that our world is not what it seems. As a holistic physician, I am always counseling my patients to become aware of what goes in, on, and around their minds and bodies. Eldon's book uncovers to what lengths corporations and government will go in order to keep people numb, dumb, and unhealthy. If you're willing to go through the gamut of so-called negative emotions, shock, indignation, anger, and hopelessness, and come out the other side, you'll be empowered by the knowledge found in this book, like I was. Every day we are being called to awaken from our unconscious slumber by transformational teachers worldwide in order to save our planet and our children. Eldon Taylor is one of those who I consider a superhero. Thank you, Eldon, for your courage and willingness to bring others to the light. Well, thank you, Karen. Superhero. I've never been called a superhero, but that's
I
a very
call you
nice...
that every day. Come
Oh,
on.
Get out of here. You want me to tell our audience what you really call me? All right. That's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by emailing me at Eldon. That's ELDON at eldontaylor.com, or by joining me on Facebook. We sincerely appreciate your comments and feedback. Now to this week's show. I saw a light and I came here. Children's Experiences of Reincarnation with the author, Professor Erlandur Haraldsson. So let me tell you a little about today's guest. Erlandur Haraldsson is a professor emeritus of psychology on the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Iceland. He has published hundreds of articles in peer-reviewed psychology and psychiatry journals. In addition, he has also published parapsychology books and authored a number of papers for parapsychology journals. Since his retirement from teaching, he has continued to conduct research and published articles. In 2007, he brought about the establishment of an endowment at the University of Iceland to support research into paranormal phenomena and alleged psychic experiences in the spirit of the research he conducted during his career. In the late 1980s, he started to investigate cases of children who claimed to remember a past life, first in Sri Lanka, over 60 cases, and later in Lebanon, 30 cases. He published many papers on these investigations and on 3 psychological studies of these children that followed. His book on the subject, I Saw a Light and Came Here, was published in 2016. We'll be discussing that in detail today. Since then, 3 documentaries have been made of some of his reincarnation cases. The first by BBC, then by Channel 4 in Britain, and by Storyhouse Productions in Washington for the Discovery Channel. So on that, let's get him in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Professor Erlandur Haraldsson.
Oh, nice to be with you.
I've been really looking forward to this show and our opportunity to share, Professor. But first, we like to know 3 things, basically, on the show. Who is the messenger? What is the message? And, of course, how do we use it? I believe you were trained under Hans Bender, the German parapsychologist. So tell us, how much influence did Bender have on your career, sir?
Well, he aroused my interest in the field, but he was not particularly interested in children who remember past life. His interest was more with poltergeist, telepathy, clairvoyance, and so on, and healing. And he was a very remarkable man, and I obtained my PhD from him.
So your initial interest in parapsychology was inspired by Bender?
Sorry, I don't hear you.
So let's talk about you then. Were you raised in a religious family, inclined or predisposed to believe in the supernatural? I mean, a lot of PhD students might meet the subject of parapsychology and shake their head at it.
Yes. Well, the question of parapsychology is essentially an empirical question. It is not a question where you should have some overbelief or be very critical against, but just let us see what is the evidence for the genuineness of the phenomena that we are discussing.
Okay, so let's begin there. Let's discuss your research methodology. Were you conducting surveys, carrying out participatory investigations, interviewing subjects, or just how did you proceed to gather the data you have compiled?
Yes, I did some surveys in Iceland about the belief of the population in the various paranormal phenomena and the attitudes towards the paranormal, and also to religious issues. That was what I did when I got my position here at the University of Iceland in 1963-64. But my involvement in cases who remember past life, that started in the late 80s, and that really came through my acquaintance and friendship with Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. I made an internship in clinical psychology at the University of Virginia in 1970 and 71, and then I came to know Dr. Stevenson quite well, and we even then had some common projects. But in the late 80s, I think it was in 88, when he had been studying cases of children who remember past lives for over 30 years, he decided to get a few solid scholars, in his view, to replicate his studies, and he asked me if I would like to study some cases, and yes, I said I would be, especially if I had the opportunity to study many enough cases to make a psychological study of the children. Are these children who claim memories of past life any different from other normal children? And he accepted that, and then I started to study children in cases of that kind in Sri Lanka.
Okay, I want to discuss a few cases with you, but first, did you derive any common denominators as a result of your investigations across all of these children?
Sorry, I have difficulties hearing you well enough.
Let me ask it again. My question is, of all of the children who remembered past lives, did you discover any common denominators? Anything in common? Pardon?
Yes, there were several. First of all, they started to talk about the past life, usually at the age of 2 to 3, or almost as early as when they know how to speak. Secondly, they will have memories, and some of these memories are about events that led to their deaths. And in about 3/4 or 4/5 of the cases, they recall having suffered a violent death, namely be having died through accidents or even murder or in acts of war. That's very common with them. Then they also have another characteristic. They very much like to meet their previous family. And they would often say to their mother, the present mother, "You are not my real mother. I want to go and find my previous home and my earlier mother." That is quite common with them. And yes, and they, so on the average, they will make maybe up to 20 different statements if you break down their story into individual statements, but it is quite variable. So it is not so that they claim to remember everything from their past life. They claim to remember certain events in their past life, especially events that led to their death, which in most cases was a violent death.
All right, Professor, I'm going to be devil's advocate for a minute so I don't get a whole lot of, email, why didn't you ask? But, there are lots of cases where people allege to make or to recall memories of past lives. Bridie Murphy comes to my mind, a very famous case. And we learn that it was a hoax, that, maybe they confabulated the information, maybe they made it up deliberately, etc. How did you guard against including any of these false memories and or hoax opportunities in your research?
Well, we interview the child and ask what he remembers from the past life. Then independently we will interview the father and the mother to hear what they have heard the child say. Also, we may interview brothers and sisters and playmates and grandfather and grandmother. We try to interview as many people as possible to see if there is some consistency in what the child has been talking about. And then we also have a further precaution. We may come and visit the case like a half a year or a year later and see if we still find the same statements. So we check these statements very carefully to be sure that it is not just a fiction of some kind. It must have been something that the child has been talking about for some time and that others have heard the child talk about.
Curiosity prompts me to ask, did you have stories from these children, any of these children, that you couldn't verify and so you excluded from your research?
Sorry, now I don't hear you well enough. But I can say that when we have come to know the statement that the child has really been saying over time, and that it is consistent, then we will try to find a person that fits that statement. Sometimes such a person has been found or is believed to have been found, but in that case we will then carefully recheck everything in that story and in the life of that particular person. So we are very do this work very thoroughly. It is like a legal study of a case.
How many total cases have you accumulated, Professor?
Excuse me?
How many total cases do you now have about past lives?
Well, in Sri Lanka, I studied some 64 cases, and I have given a detailed report of several of them in my book on reincarnation. I saw a light and came here. And then I studied in in Lebanon some, was it 32 or 34 cases. So, and then I found one case here in Iceland, and then I helped with Stevenson to investigate a part of a case or cases in India. So I think I may say I have studied nearly 100 cases of children who remember or claim to remember a past life.
Wow. When we come back, I'm going to ask you why so many cases in Sri Lanka and so few in a place like India. But we have a hard break.
Well,
we're speaking with Professor...
Well, you have to decide where you
We have to go to
study.
break, Professor. When we come back, we'll talk about that. We're speaking with Professor Erlandur Haraldsson about his remarkable book, I Saw a Light and Came Here. You can learn more about our guest and his work by visiting his website at hi.is, commercial @ that's the snail symbol, Erlander. Now we have a video for you in our chat room featuring the professor's work with children who recall past lives as Buddhist monks. So if you're not in the chat room already, now's the time to get on over there. You can do that by going to provocativeenlightenment.com/chat. Okay, do please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
New scientific research has repeatedly demonstrated that the power of your mind can do wonderful things if you believe in yourself. Indeed, it can literally change the brain, increasing cognitive abilities, rewiring connections, and even adding gray matter. And all you have to do is invest a little time in tuning your mind. The perfect toolkit for just that is the patented and proven effective Inner Talk technology. Inner Talk changes the way you talk to yourself, and that changes everything. For when you truly believe in yourself and your own abilities, magic happens. Inner Talk has over 300 programs to choose from, ranging from health and wellness to prosperity and success, from accelerated learning to relationships, from habits and addictions to spirituality. Remove the doubt and fear now. Go to innertalk.com today.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're chatting with Professor Erlandur Haraldsson about his remarkable book, I Saw a Light and Came Here. This is a great read, and it's a scientific book looking at something I think most of us would normally think of as being very spiritual. If you wanted evidence, if you wanted documentation, if you wanted to convince yourself, it's a book to read. You can learn more about our guest and his work by visiting his website at hi.is, and then the snail symbol, Erlander. Now we ask our guests for their favorite music that has some true significance to them. Music psychology, as you know by now, is not just a avocation of mine. It's a field of research with practical relevance in many areas, including intelligence, creativity, personality, and social behavior. So, we just played some of Lighthouse's Light the Way. Tell us, Professor, why is this music important to you, and how did it inform us about who you are?
Would you repeat the question?
Sure. We just played your favorite music. Why is it important to you, and how does it tell us who you are?
You mean how this research is important to me?
Yes.
Well, I think any research that tries to answer some questions is worthwhile. And there are some children who claim to have memories of past life, and I think it is a worthwhile effort to investigate it thoroughly and see if there can be any truth in what they are saying. Now, that is what I and like Stevenson have been doing. And the results are very interesting. It is not so that all of these children, what they say, can be verified, but about 1/3 or a bit more can be verified. And so there is something in what they are saying, and it is well possible that these are actual memories of a past life. There have been other sort of explanations, like that these children have a capacity to go into the zoom in on someone who has passed away in the past and get information from him. But that is a bit far-fetched, I think. Then there is one very interesting feature of these cases, and that is that some of these children, they have birthmark. I told you earlier that a large number of these children, they speak about that they died violently, like through accidents. And then we have found that these accidents often leave a mark on the body, and a large birthmark is found where the previous personality is known to have suffered a wound that led to his or her death.
How frequent is it for somebody to die a violent death and have a birthmark where they were stabbed or shot or impaled by some object or something of that nature? How common is that?
Sorry, how common is what?
How common is it for someone to have a birthmark as a result, or that corresponds to a wound in a prior life?
Well, we haven't really looked at how many people have birthmarks and see then if they remember any past life. But some of the children who claim past lives, they have birthmarks. And we have had very good evidence from post-mortem reports that they had birthmarks where they suffered a violent death on that spot, like in the case of Purnima Ekanayaga that I describe in detail in the book. And there are also other cases. So this is pretty well verified. Then Stevenson, who was sort of the grand master of reincarnation studies, he published 2 volumes on birthmark cases and deformation cases. But perhaps there's one thing that I would like to bring up, and that is, I told you in the beginning, I wanted to study if these children who have these memories differ in any important way from normal children. And in fact, they do. I tested them with some psychological tests. For example, they have a greater vocabulary at a young age than children of the same age. They tend to do very well in school. They are quite industrious in school, and they come out well in some simple tests of intelligence. So these are often gifted children. But then there is another side to them, and that is that some of them have fears, and that fears that they usually relate to the way they died, because it seems they are thinking about the mode of death very frequently, and that may cause what we call in psychology post-traumatic stress disorder. And so that's what they have. And so they are very gifted, but they are also have more problems than other children.
That's interesting. So when you looked at them from a psychological standpoint, if you were to divorce that child from the memories, from being what I want to say, I guess, is if their memories hadn't been treated as though they were real, do you believe that the psychology of the child would be the same?
Well, I think in many of the cases, some of the cases, we verify these memories that the child has. For example, let me tell you about one case.
Please.
It was a boy. He claimed to have lived in nearby in a Capricia moon, and he had arms and pistols and hand grenades and things like that. And and he had been shot. And then his parents decided to take him to Capricia moon after he had been begging them for it for a long time. And when they came there, they found a family where the husband had been killed. He had been the bodyguard of a very important Druze personality in Lebanon. And his statements really fitted quite well the life of that particular personality. Yes. So we find cases that are quite impressive, but I would say only about 10% of the cases we investigate are really impressive. About 20% are really impressive. Maybe about 40% there is something in them, but then they have many cases where there seems to be no evidence of any kind for that they are correct.
Professor, did you have any in the 100 that you studied that were suicidal or had committed suicide in a prior life?
Well, there were very few cases of suicide. I only remember one case. It was a boy who lived in the mountains of Lebanon, and he was saying to his parents he has a home in Beirut, near the sea, near a mosque, near a small harbor with boats, and so on and so forth. And also that he had lived on the first floor of a building so that he could jump over the balcony to the street. And there were some more statements. Well, they first did nothing about this, but then the boy's father asked a friend of his in Lebanon, in Beirut, to investigate the case. And he found, and by the way, the boy had said his name had been Rabia in the previous life. And he found a family that lived in the Jal al-Bar district, close to the sea and close to a small harbor with boats and to a small mosque. And this family lived on the ground floor, so it had been easier for the boy to jump over the balcony to the street. Well, anyway, during the Civil War, this boy left for America, for California, where he studied, I think it was electrical engineering. But he became depressed. He wanted to go home. I didn't have money to do it. So he attempted suicide, but not successfully. And then a distant relative took him to his home. But then one night when they came home, then they found him that he had hanged himself in their garage. And but the boy never said that he had committed suicide. But by the way, one of the things he said was that I live in two countries, and one to which I have to go by airplane. And that fits the boy well, because he of course lived in California at that time. But he was saying that he had been beaten up and gave some other explanation, but never mentioned that he had committed suicide. So
did the boy?
How the case is. This is a case of yeah. Well, it's in my book.
Was this boy still depressed and still suicidal in his reincarnated state, in his new incarnation?
Sorry, now again I do not hear you properly.
The boy you just told us about, in his new incarnation, did the suicidal tendency, his depression, did it continue?
No, the present boy, he didn't have any suicidal tendency that we were aware of. No, he was not.
Okay.
And he was a normal boy. So
one of the theories that I've heard put forward, Professor, about these young people that seem to come right back in, that is, they're here and there's still evidence of their prior life. Maybe it's in their family or a friend or something of that nature. Is it their life ends suddenly, prematurely, and they come right back in as quick as they can, as opposed to doing anything in between lives? Have you found that to be true?
Well, if I understand you rightly, in Lebanon and Sri Lanka, we rarely found what we call in-family cases, and namely that the person who spoke about a previous life had previously lived in the same family. So that was very rare. But there is one man we should mention, and that is Jim Tucker of the University of Virginia. He has emphasized the study of American and European cases, particularly American cases, and found some very interesting ones.
Let me ask you this, Professor. Do you think that past life memories and encounters with the dead become relevant with respect to the question of life after death and possible life before birth?
Yes, I think it is relevant for the question of life after death, because it is relevant for the question of life before death. But I am not saying we can be absolutely sure about it, but we have considerable evidence for this, and it has been accumulating. There are now a great number of very detailed studies of children who seem to remember a past life and whose memories have been verified, not only by Stevenson and me, but also some others.
Did you have children that remembered between lives? I mean, they remembered their past life, but did they remember between lives?
You were talking about twins?
Yeah, the children that you interviewed, this 100 cases, were there any of them that could tell you what the afterlife was like? Did they remember the afterlife?
I'm sorry, I hear. The phone is not good, I think. I hear you not clearly.
I'm sorry. Let me try that again. We live, we die, there's an afterlife, we reincarnate.
Yes.
Did any of the children remember the afterlife, that state between death and being born again?
Some do that. Oh, yes. Like this Punyama Kanayaka I mentioned earlier, she remembered observing her family after her death and their grief. And then she was hovering around in semi-darkness, as were also others. And she saw a light and came here, she said, namely, she was born into the family that she is living with now. And there was also one boy who claimed to have been a senior monk in a monastery in Sri Lanka, and he very much wanted to be dressed like monk. He behaved like a monk. Was very different from other boys, and he stated that he remembered that he was in some kind of a state between his previous death and the present life, and he said that he was among the devas. Like we would say in the Christian sphere, he was among the angels.
Tell us about deathbed visions, Professor.
Excuse me?
Tell us about deathbed visions.
Deathbed visions. Well, it has long been observed that some people, before they die, they have visions of deceased relative or spouses and so on, and even some religious beings like angels. And with Karlis Osis, I did a major study of deathbed visions that we conducted both in the U.S. and in India. And we got our data from doctors and nurses who told us about their observations of people who were having visions, or we used to call them hallucinations. And these visions were of a particular kind. They were usually so that the person experienced that someone had come, someone they knew, and that person indicated to them or told them and so on that they were going to take them to the other world. And so we, Karlis Osis and I, we came to call these cases take-away cases. It was almost like a routine. These beings who had lived before and had died, they were there to help the dying to get into the new world. And very interesting phenomena. And our book, At the Hour of Death, it was published in many languages and is still available. And since then, there's also one Fenwick, Peter and Elizabeth Fenwick. They have made a study of deathbed visions in hospices. And the carers in the hospices, they think that these deathbed visions, they are not hallucinations of the ordinary type. They are a natural sign of impending death, that the person is close to death. And they are also not related to drug intake or some sickness that may cause hallucinations.
I hate to cut you off, sir. It's a most interesting book. I saw a light and came here, Children's Experiences of Reincarnation. Again, it's a factual document that I think just about everybody interested in reincarnation is going to be interested in reading. I want to thank you, Professor, for your willingness to share with us, and all of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our show and will join us again next week as well. Until then, wherever you are in the world, remember, believing in yourself always matters.
Provocative Enlightenment has been brought to you by Progressive Awareness Research and other sponsors. Provocative Enlightenment is a syndicated show and appears on other networks. For a schedule of show times, visit provocativeenlightenment.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, write to Eldon at eldontaylor.com.